Welcome everyone to the first Finance and Performance meeting for this calendar year, our February 2025 meeting. Welcome to everyone watching online. And I'd like to open by asking everyone to stand and I'll read the council group. Almighty God, as members of the Rangitikei District Council, we give thanks for all the good things of our district and the advantages we enjoy. We pray that you will give us wisdom and guidance as we conduct the affairs of this meeting. We pray for all the communities and the districts we represent. Help us to be fair and honest in our discussions and help us to work together in unity for the welfare of all your people. Amen. We have apologies received from Mrs. Leanne Caroti, and I'd like to move on a second for those apologies, please. Thank you, Councillor Carter. Second, thank you, Councillor Wong. Not been notified of any public forum this morning. Does anyone have any conflicts they'd like to declare now? If not, the normal procedure is if we're discussing matters that are a conflict, please raise them at the time. Confirmation of order of business. There's no new items to be added and the order is unchanged as per the order paper. Item number 6, confirmation of minutes. Can I call for any amendments or matters arising? Page 6, page 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10. Anything want to be brought to our attention? Can I have a
move as true and correct, Jen?
Thank you. Who got happy to second that? Thank you very much, Councillor Lawson, Councillor Moore. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Page 11, follow-up items from previous meetings. I see they're all closed. Are there any items anyone would like to discuss now? I just thought anyone like to talk to that? Thank you, Leanne.
Good morning, everybody, and I'll just give a very brief update on what that debt is relating to halls. Bit of a dig because we changed finance systems in the middle of it. But initially the debt is Te Matapihi. So we borrowed, I want to say off the top of my head, I think the cost was around 6 mil. We owe 5 million of that was brought across to our new system. So that's obviously what we owe. And then the balance, the 2.2, is for a number of projects that we've been involved in. Bus lane, Memorial Hall, the Martin building design, and some costs against the Taihape Town Hall, and that's around 2.2, hence the 7.2 in total.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon.
Well, just the bus lane. Are there more expenses expected for the bus lane?
Oh, I can't answer that. I'll hand it to.
Thank you. Through you,
Madam Chair, yes, there is. We're still working on a solution to get heavy vehicle traffic off that bus lane, so there is more to come. It won't be a substantial amount, but there is still more.
That's covered in the council's reports today. So yes and no. Yeah, just relating the two together.
Thank you. Can I ask the follow-up items be received? Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Carter, seconded Councillor Sharland. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So, a verbal chair's report. Thinking about what's top of mind for me at the moment. Last week, we met with our colleagues in the Ruapehu and Wanganui districts as we aim to work together towards a local water done well and regional deals. Work together on local water done well and regional deals. I believe shared services are the way forward for local government. The challenge now is how we forge strong partnerships with visible cost efficiencies and value add for our ratepayers, while retaining strong local voice. Quite a dance. Finally, my other ongoing concern is around our council's ability to deliver our capital projects within budget and expected timeframes. On page 62 of this order paper, this key metric for the first 6 months of the year sits at 19.3%. I find this alarming. While I accept this is a reflection of the scale of the projects on our table at the moment, we have to be really concerned about over-promising and under-delivering. It's my report today. Any queries to that? Beg your pardon.
Yes, thank you very much for that comment. It's absolutely correct. And I take on board the advice in terms that Leanne has given us as CFO. That means that we need to be very, very proactive in terms of carry forward positions. So there's a substantial body of work that needs to be done in terms of understanding how much of that work will be delivered, what will be carried forward. So I appreciate finance report with regard to that as well.
We'll touch on that. That's okay.
Thank you. So I'd like to move that, I beg your pardon, councillor Carter.
I'll second it.
That the chair's report will be received, seconded councillor Carter. Reports for information. I think Leanne, you lead us through this, and we've got
So again, good morning, and through the chair, I'd like to introduce Miles O'Connor from Bancorp. So I think most of you have met Miles in prior meetings, and Miles is our Treasury advisor, and I've asked him, with me coming on board, to review our Treasury policy, Treasury management policy, because I just felt it was lacking a few bits for the way I work. So he's going to present that to us this morning, and he's also just going to give us a refresher on that, what he's been doing for us and how he uses swaps in our debt profile to manage our interest costs. So I'm going to hand it over to Miles, and hopefully he can share his screen on his presentation.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present today. Look, I'll start with going through the policy. Now, you've got that in front of you, have you?
Correct, it's on our tin. Everyone should have that on the tin can. I'm hoping. So I can turn it off there, so it's going to be there.
And I'll share the, I just said to Leanne, I might have a few problems. We use Teams normally, so sometimes sharing on Zoom's a wee bit problematic, but hopefully this will be all right. So look, I'll start with the Treasury policy. What we tried to do here was just to make it more, I think as Leanne said, there were probably, it wasn't what was in there, it's probably what wasn't in there that was slightly, that needed to be amended or that needed to be included, just to give you the ability to manage your Treasury exposures properly and to make sure, you know, that you had the correct governance around the management of the Treasury exposures. So in your set, so I'm not sure how it's presented to you, but it's numbered section 3 with the track changes, organisational and responsibility structure. So this is an addition here, because there wasn't any definition of who of what the structure was in the council and who does what. And I think that's a pretty important point, because you need to know whose responsibility it is. And sometimes, I mean, it does happen occasionally that it works until something goes wrong, and then sort of the finger pointing starts, and it's, well, no, it wasn't my responsibility, it was someone else's responsibility. So this just sets out what the structure is and who does what. So we have a number of subsections, well, a number of different roles. So there's you don't want me to go through each one. You've probably read it. I mean, I can go through each point, but tell me if you do want me to. But I mean, we started with the full council. The important point here is that, you know, council has the oversight and approves the policy document, and any amendments to the policy, approves new borrowing facilities. Now that's just if you decided to join, you know, have another significant party like the LGFA, then council would have to approve it. And you do, you know, council does monitor and review the ongoing treasury performance. So certainly it's a governance and it's an oversight role. It's not a hands-on role, because that's not council's responsibility. That's the management. Then we go down to the chief executive, who approves any amendments to the treasury policy, and the CEO monitors the ongoing treasury risk management performance of the council. So that's just an oversight of the treasury function. Now, the biggest one is obviously the group manager corporate services. So that's Leanne, clearly, and that's where the main decision making and the main responsibility lies for managing the treasury exposures. So there are quite a few bullet points there. Do you want me to go through them, or will I take them as read?
Thank you. I'll just jump in there and just clarify that for council. This is managing what has already been approved in a long-term plan or annual plan. So it is not giving me authority to go out and draw down on debt that you have not already agreed to in your long-term plan or annual plan. Just wanted to clarify that.
Essentially, what the group manager of corporate services responsibility is to manage the funding side of it, so the drawing down of debt, and also the ongoing management of the debt, and that will come that's a bit clearer when I go through the interest rate swaps. But you can use interest rate swaps to achieve effective fixed rate, an appropriate amount of fixed rate debt. And then there's some of the transactional responsibilities. You have the authority to undertake treasury transactions as well. Then it goes down to the next heading is manager finance and partnerships. So that position assists the general manager corporate services with the development of interest rate risk management strategies. So it's another sounding board. Leanne does have the authority to do it herself, but can call on the assistance if she wanted to run a potential strategy past them. Determines the level of future core debt, because we have to know what the level of core debt is before we can actually institute an effective risk management program. Again, it's the treasury transactions as well, because you can't just have one person responsible for managing treasury transactions, because you have to have a backup. And that was one part that probably was lacking in the last policy, that because it was silent on this, there wasn't really the authority to undertake treasury transactions. The next one is the manager financial services. Actually, sorry, I'll probably have to go through this a bit quicker because I'm mindful I've got about 20 minutes, isn't it? Assist with the development of the interest rate risk management strategies, prepares all relevant treasury reports, and there's a bit missing there in the absence of the general manager corporate services, or the manager of financial or the manager finance and partnerships develops all undertakes the treasury transactions. And then it goes down to the accountant. So prepares all end of year financial reports and monitors the financial covenants. Then if it's on the new numbered 4, the interest rate exposure, we just added the net debt to total revenue covenant because that was in a different section. It should have been under covenants, and that's the debt should not exceed 175% of revenue. Now, the big change probably is this one, the numbered 4.5. Can you see that interest rate risk management?
Page
So-
8.
Is that put on you? Now, what this, I think that the last policy was reasonably silent on this, and it just said that council had a preference for having a higher percent, quite a high percentage of fixed rate debt, but it didn't say how much. So what we've done here is to introduce what we call these in the table fixed rate cover percentages, and it gives minimum and maximum amounts of fixed rate cover and spread over 3 time frames. So 0 to 2 years, you have to have a minimum of 40% cover and a maximum of 90. Then 2 to 4 is a minimum of 20, but a maximum of 75. And 4 to 8 years, it can be 0, but then it can go up to 60%. So it gives us a reasonably wide range to operate within. We don't go up to 100% in 0 to 2 years because we wouldn't want to hedge 100% of debt in case something happened where your debt didn't reach the projected levels or it actually fell. But this is common amongst all councils. I mean, we advise about 30, I think I worked it out the other day, about 38 councils. All of them have these fixed rate cover percentages. And it sort of forms the basis of the interest rate risk management. We included interest rate risk management instruments because, again, the policy didn't say what you could use to manage debt. In the past, you've had exclusively fixed rate debt, fixed rate bonds from at present, you have fixed rate bonds from the local government funding agency. It's not probably entirely appropriate because you should have some level of floating rate debt. I mean, that's it. That's just emphasised by the fact that the official cash rate has fallen from 5.5 down to 3.75 and will probably go to 3.25. So you should have some of your debt floating in order to be able to take advantage of that fall in interest rates. And then when they do bottom out, we do have the ability to fix it. Funding risk management, the main point here is that we just want to spread the debt out so that you don't have more than 40% of debt maturing within a rolling 12-month period. And that just de-risks you as far as having too much debt maturing in any one time frame. It lists what you can borrow, the methods from which you can borrow, counterparty credit exposure. That's just protecting you from who you can, it limits by restricting credit ratings, who you can actually undertake financial market transactions with, because you do have an exposure to them when you take out interest rate swaps. And it's it'll be your bank, that'll be best. We introduce in the 4.1 management reporting what should be included in the reports to the Finance and Performance Committee. Then we go through to the investment policy. Now, the main one here is that, and if I scroll down, it's really, it goes down to the appendix. Sorry.
Sorry, I've just got a question here from the table.
Mm.
Councillor Loudon.
Hi, Miles. How do you define core debt? Because since I've been at this table, the debt has risen and the impression is it's not actually being paid back, and the core debt seems to be rising.
Mm.
What's your definition of core debt?
That's actually a really good question.
Jump in and answer that one through the chair. So core debt is the debt that belongs specifically to the council. So if you think about as we move forward into local water done well, if we end up with some debt still sitting with us as we transition, but we have an offset from them as in an agreed liability to pay it back, so the liability sits on their books, our core debt will be excluding that. So if we have a CCR, council controlled organisation, and we loan to them, that would not be our core debt because it would be offset by an arrangement for repayment. So our core debt is the business that we carry out here at council for council, and we do repay our debt. And if you think about my opening explanation of the 6.2, it's now 5. We do pay back our debt, and you can see that. I was looking at the roading one today in the long-term plan, and you can see in the 10 years where we borrow and then we reduce that debt, and you'll see that through all of the activities in the long-term plan. Does that answer it?
I think so, but I'm going to think about it.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, the core debt is the debt that you've got, you know, on a longer term basis. It doesn't include debt that you might have just on a short term basis to cover operational cash flow, because one of the intentions that what we're going to introduce is a bank facility. So that might cater for your short term funding requirements, and that could be for a week or a month. That's not core debt. It's what's probably or the way that it's defined really is that it's that debt that is there for the longer term and as part of, it's not just operational expenditure. It can be related to expenditure as well.
You've got a comment?
Yes, thank you, Miles. You're involved with a huge number of councils. In terms of the transition to regional CCOs, in terms of shareholding and potential liabilities, is there going to be a suite of recommendations that you would make in terms of a statement of council's positions, etc.? I'm just wondering, I don't want to do this sort of stuff in isolation. There must be a whole body of work being associated with that, or links in some shape or form.
So that's the local water done well. Yeah, I've only got 20 minutes on this presentation. I could probably spend
I take your point.
talking to you on that, because it's something that occupies myself and my colleagues' time an awful lot, and we are putting a lot of work into it. I mean, very briefly, it is an important topic, so I might spend 2 or 3 minutes on it. I mean, with the local water done well, if you go into a regional CCO with Whanganui and Ruapehu, and Ruapehu are a client of ours as well, then the debt of each entity, of each current council that is associated with water, will become the responsibility of the new CCO, and you will not have. So that will be removed from your balance sheet and onto the CCO's balance sheet. Now, it's not clear at the moment, but if you, the most likely outcome is with the CCO, the portion of the debt that is water related that you've got from the LGFA, gets a wee bit complicated, cannot be what's called novated over or transferred to the CCO. It may well have to remain on your books, but you will have no responsibility for paying the interest, so you'll have no interest rate risk associated with it. And then when that debt matures, the new entity will fund it itself. There is a possibility that the debt could be closed out and then it'll be refunded on the same day by the LGFA. But the important point is that you won't have responsibility for it. Now, at the moment, we're proceeding as if on a business as usual case, because I mean, we saw last time, I mean, it was going to be 1 July 24 and that didn't happen. So until it happens, we have to assume that, you know, you've got the debt and it's water related, but you will lose that portion of your debt that is water related in the new CCO. And that will have to be set up. I think there have been 7 CCOs set up recently that can fund directly from the LGFA. And I think we've been involved in 4 of them. We've just completed one, quite complicated one very recently. So we do have quite a bit of experience in that, but there's the legal aspect to it. There's the governance aspect to it. There's the treasury policy aspect to it, and there's the funding, and then there's the interest rate risk management. That's just from our perspective. And obviously there's a whole lot of other considerations that we don't get involved with.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the depth of work. I just assumed that this was happening, and that it was happening in some form of collective basis. So thank you. I will have some further questions later in the finance report around some of this as well.
I think it's important to note that a number of councils, some of the bigger ones, are actually just keeping it in-house. So they're keeping the management of the water in-house. But to the comments earlier about having shared services and producing economies of scale, well, I mean, I agree with that, because I mean, if you can combine 3 councils into one, the water aspect of your operation, then it's obviously going to lead to greater efficiencies. How much of your debt, I mean, what is it, 48 million, I think, at the moment? How much of your debt is water related at the moment, Leanne?
Through the chair, by 30 June, we will have approximately 43 million of water debt. It makes up about 50% of our 56% of our debt.
No. So you'll lose 56% of your debt if you go into the new entity. But it'll be 50% of each tranche of debt, because you have a number of maturities. So you just don't say, well, okay, that's the water debt, that's ours, because you could actually cherry pick. And if you've got good rates, then you could keep it. And if you've got bad rates, say, well, I'll throw that over to the CCO.
And we're reviewing that with Miles all the time at the moment to ensure that we can allocate the best, leave us RDC in the best position.
Sorry,
Well, I think
through you, Madam Chair, Leanne, what was the figure you just gave?
56% of our debt is through waters.
Yeah, I looked at it and I made it about 46 point something.
I might be thinking of 30 June, because I've taken mine out to 30 June.
That would figure. Yeah,
I've gone out to 30 June, and I think we're going to be about 73 million 30 June.
Yep.
And I think 43 or 40 something of that is through waters.
Yeah. I'll have another question about that later, but let Miles do us.
Miles, we've just got another question from Councillor Loudon.
I just,
Yes.
at 4.8, counterparty credit exposure, is that solely related to CCOs?
none of this is so this is purely Rangitikei District Council. It's not related to the CCOs. This is the policy of council.
Thank you. If you can keep going.
All right. Now, in Appendix 1, it's the procedures for financial market transactions. I think there's a T missing there. Apologies for that. In the heading, what this is doing is just providing you with some sort of safety net, and that it sets out how you actually undertake financial market transactions, and what it does is it places the responsibility for one, the person who initially who undertakes a financial market transaction must record it, and that has to be checked by someone else from the external transaction to make sure that everything is correct. So, and it covers funding and interest rate derivative products, which are the swaps that I'm going to mention. And the last one is the Appendix 2, authorised investment criteria for financial market transactions. The last policy was silent on this, and it didn't really say who you can invest with and how much you can invest with each. So this is probably, I won't say it's excessive, but it just does give you the ability. It just does clearly spell out who you can invest with and how much you can invest with them, what instruments you can invest in, and what the credit rating is for the counterparty who you're investing with. So it really is future-proofing you, and it's just a safety measure. It looks complicated. In reality, it isn't. And the main one is the New Zealand registered banks, because that's where most of your deposits will be. The only thing I would bring up is the amount that you can invest with a New Zealand registered bank, which is rated A- or better. So that covers the big four, and Westpac, your transactional banker, is 10 million enough? I mean, sometimes you do have quite a bit of money invested, quite a few funds invested. So the only question is 10 million enough? Would your exposure to Westpac exceed that?
Through the chair, it could do. And I've in prior work at 20, which just gives us a bit more flexibility. And maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Would you, before adopting the changes, would you want to change that?
That would be my recommendation.
Yes, it would be.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'll make that
15?
change. I think 15, it just meets in the middle. We can go 20, it's not going to hurt us. It just gives us flexibility. Should we leave it at 20 like we've done across other councils?
It just depends on what you think the maximum amount will be. The other way that we do have a wee bit of wriggle room here, and we can say, well, look, it's overnight cash and term deposits. Although that would actually, you would put excess money on what term deposit and overnight cash, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just have it sitting in a check account.
Correct, but I've always excluded current account from the funds just because sometimes it does come flying through. Nowadays, where you've got 7 days a week to be able to receive income from ratepayers as they make payments, I'd probably want to exclude current account.
Okay, well, maybe we just put a note under this saying that the 10 million excludes current account, and we increase it to 20 million.
Sounds good.
And that's the Treasury policy.
Thank you, Miles. Is there any further questions for Ollie's online? No. Thank you.
I have one.
Thank you.
Miles, in prior policies, we've usually done an explanation of the different instruments we use. Do you think we should have that as an appendix?
No.
Okay.
Only because, look, it just makes I don't want the policies to be too long.
Okay.
And then it just starts to get wordy and cumbersome. So I'm probably not in favour of that, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, do you want me? I'll see if I can share this presentation.
Just ask one quick question, and perhaps through the chair to you, Leanne. So with this policy, Treasury, it's 9.1 on our wallpaper, Treasury Management Policy Review. What is there any risks or anything that we need to be considering about with the formation in the future of these CCOs and what that looks like as to the amount of borrowing that will be into the LGFA and what our risk exposure would be? Does that fall under this policy? Because it's possibly going to increase, is it not?
Through the chair, that is something we're still working our way through, but yes, and we met with the DIA recently, Dave Foster, and talked briefly about that as the three councils. And that's one I still haven't got 100% clarity about, because ultimately we, the council, are guarantoring our share.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like we have to hold the headroom in the sense of the 10%, but we will have to guarantor that. And I guess the risk is if the CCO folded, we would revert to rating for that income. And so we are actually then protected again. But boy, it would make the government scramble if that happened.
Some work involved.
Still work involved in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The swaps presentation, can you see that screen?
Not yet, no.
Okay, hold on.
That's all right.
It's not just us.
I don't know.
I'm just getting.
That's what I missed.
And Kezia can put it on our screen, Miles.
In fact, it's there.
Sorry,
Got it. Thank you.
So go, Miles.
It's on your screen?
Yeah,
Thank
can you
you.
see it?
I can see it. Well, I can see it on my screen. Yes. So so the sharing's worked.
No.
No, we're sharing it ourselves.
Oh, okay, right. So we use Teams and we find Zoom sharing problematic. Well, actually, just 1 minute.
No, it's all right. We've got
Right,
it.
go.
It's easy.
Right. So the advantage of interest rate swaps. Interest rate swaps are very flexible, as they can be. So
Okay, cool. Just flick to next page. Pull the pages as you go, Miles, please.
what's that? Sorry.
So we're now on page 2. Just let us know when you need us to change pages.
So the heading interest rate swaps.
Yeah.
So interest rate swaps, what they do, they use to limit or manage exposures to fluctuation in interest rates. So in their most common form, they convert fixed floating rate debt into a fixed rate debt. In other words, instead of having a fixed rate bond, you can enter into an interest rate swap. And it's an agreement between two parties. Your Rangitikei District Council is one party, and we'll show this in the diagram on the next page. And the bank, which is Westpac in your case, is the other counterparty. As I say, an interest rate swap is most commonly used to exchange a floating interest rate payment for a fixed rate payment. They can start immediately, which is called a spot swap, or they can be forward starting, which the latter is it's really good for managing interest rate exposures, because it may be that you have an exposure in the future, or it may be that we project interest rates to go up in a couple of years' time. So instead of having the debt fixed now, you can actually fix it in 2 years' time, say for a period of 3 years or 4 years. And it's important to note that interest rate swaps are used regularly by about more than 90%. I'd actually say more than 95% of local authorities. Well, no, okay, we'll stick with 90% to manage interest rate risk. So they're very commonly used. Now, interest rate swaps got a bad rap around the GFC. And there was a lot of adverse publicity. And the reason for that was that they were sold badly by the banks, and that resulted in quite a bit of liability attaching to the banks. They had to pay out. But I think the important, I can explain what happened there if you want me to. It takes 2 or 3 minutes. Why they got that bad reputation. And as I said, it was because they were badly sold. Do you want me to mention that, or should I carry on?
Keep going. Keep going to Miles.
The next page is how an interest rate swap works. So that's slide 3.
Yep.
Now, this would be easier if I was there, but I did explain. I think I went through this last time. But if you look at the down arrow from RDC to the LGFA, you borrow, and if you're borrowing on a floating rate, you borrow at a 90-day rate, which is known as BKBM, which at the moment is 3.8, plus a margin associated with a debt of 0.71%. So that's the physical borrowing. Now, on the arrow going horizontally under the swap, where it says fixed for 3 years at 351, you enter into an agreement where Westpac will guarantee you an interest rate of 3.51%. So you pay the bank 3.51 fixed for a period of 3 years. And it's but the bank, and this is the complicated bit, they pay you the 90-day bank bill rate at 3.8% under the swap. Now, if you go back to the down arrow, you will see the RDC down to the LGFA. You're borrowing at the 90-day rate of 3.8% plus this 0.71 margin, but you're receiving the 90-day rate at 3.81%. So then you go to the box, and what it's doing is you're paying fixed for 3 years, the top line at 3.51%, but you receive BKBM from the bank and you pay BKBM to the LGFA. And they're both 3.8%, so they cancel each other out. So what you're effectively doing is you're borrowing at 3.51% plus that margin associated with the LGFA debt of 0.71. So you're borrowing all up at 4.22%. And that's the fixed rate that you will get for a 3-year period. It's resets every 3 months. And if the 90-day rate is above the swap rate, the bank pays you. And if the 90-day rate is below the swap rate, then you pay the bank the difference. But the important thing is that it fixes your debt. Have I confused everyone? Are there any questions on that?
Any questions? No,
No, we're good.
stunned silence.
It's hedging your risk.
It is, it's exactly hedging your risk.
That's what it does. So you're not caught out by the big swings.
No, exactly. The important thing is that you're not creating a risk, as you've said. It's actually minimizing your risk, and used properly, then they're a very effective tool. It might be at times that it's better to use a fixed rate bond, but that's our job to see which is the best method to fix your debt.
And
The advantage,
it's better to use somebody like Bancorp to do that rather than have individuals playing with it, because that's when you get somebody in this position that's too clever and it actually costs you money.
well, there have been examples. I mean, I think Orange County was a famous one where they lost in California, where they lost $2 billion in swaps because someone was speculating with them.
That's what happens.
And it is not a speculative tool, it is there to manage our risk.
Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I think that was my first question, was who's going to manage this? And thank you for asking that question, because it's now been clearly answered. But with all these things, Miles, where's the risk? What's the downside? I mean, to be able to get a net fixed position of that and understand that we can share that risk across and take a little bit of good with a bit of bad, which allows us to have a fixed rate, but also a little bit of a floating in there at the same time. What's the risk? What's the downside? Everything has a downside, Miles.
The downside is that if you fix at 3.51% and the floating rate goes to 2.5%, then you've foregone the opportunity of participating in that move down to 2.5% because you've locked yourself in at 3.51. That in a nutshell is the risk. But what we're doing is that we're trying to protect it. I mean, you've actually got more risk at the moment because you've had only fixed rate bonds and not having.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. So you mentioned before that is reviewable on a 3-month cycle.
Oh no, sorry. The going back to the calculation, there's a calculation done every 3 months where you pay. Either you pay the bank the difference or the bank pays you the difference. If you entered into the swap at the moment, the bank would be paying you the difference. But if the 90-day rate, the floating rate goes below 3.51, then you will effectively be locked in at 3.51%. So you won't be able to participate in any future moves of the OCR and of the floating rate going lower.
One final question, if I could just ask, are you suggesting with this interest rate shock that it would cover the entire of the council's debt position through funding, or just a portion of?
A portion, yeah. Yeah.
It's just mixing it out, because right now we're all in fixed and there's no flexibility and we're locked in. This gives us a little bit more flexibility, but it's a mixture. It's got to be a mixture.
Thank you.
To be fair, it was raised by Mary Andy as to whether we were too much into that fix, which is what Miles is saying. And so with Leanne coming on board, we've moved to reduce perceived risk. But in my view, it's still better managed by somebody like Bancorp rather than your individual. And that's not taking anything.
No,
Leanne, that you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the clarity.
The only bit I disagree with on that is that it should be managed by someone like Bancorp. I'd take out the someone like.
Point noted.
Miles, you mentioned a portion of the borrowing. What's an appropriate a portion that should be assigned towards Bancorp? No one else.
So it goes back to that policy that Miles took you through earlier, where we had those bands of what will be fixed, floating,
Right.
and managing it that way. We have engaged Bancorp to manage our treasury policy process and our debt portfolio. So every time we need to borrow debt, we talk to Miles and we get the best advice from Miles. He is the subject matter expert. We're not a big enough council to be able to justify having an in-house expert like Miles.
Yeah, in terms of scale, that's one of the issues. As an organisation, you have to look at the number of transactions and the size of them as to whether it justifies having Bancorp doing this work on a contractual basis with us? The answer is yes. And it's a scale thing.
As I said, and we do advise. We're the biggest treasury advisor in Australasia. We do advise, I think, as I said, 38 local authorities. We have an incredibly high retention rate. I think in the last 10 years, I've lost one council as a client, only because they knew of a new person went there and knew of our opposition. So I think probably the benefits of it are in the retention rate, and Leanne has worked with us in prior roles as well.
Yep.
The local authority sector, we have 220 clients, roughly 220 clients who we advise on an ongoing basis. And of those, 38 of those are the local authorities. They're our largest sector group. So it's the biggest sector that we advise on.
Question from Councillor Wong, please.
Just on our financial policy, what have we recommended to limit the amount of our debt to non-fixed to that just perhaps can apply to? How high are we going? I missed it.
Our fixed rate covered percentage is on page 8 of that policy that Miles took us through earlier.
Yes.
So no more than, and it depends on the length of the debt to how much we can have at minimum and maximum.
Right. How much does it allow us to have the swaps perhaps? What would that allow the swaps to be up to?
That will depend on the floating component of the portfolio. So we'll have a fixed and we'll have a floating within this covenant, within this range. And the swaps can only be on the floating.
Right.
So the important point is that it gives us the flexibility to manage your fixed rate and floating rate debt that you have according to the economic conditions and the monetary conditions at the time. Now we're coming towards the end of our easing cycle. I mean, we're at 175 points of easing. So I would look to increase some of the level of some of your fixed rate debt. You do have very high levels at the moment because you've only got fixed rate debt, but further out. So it really, the reason why there's a range is that it enables us to operate and effectively manage the debt given the prevailing economic and monetary policy conditions at the time.
Moving on.
Awesome, yes, please.
Keep going, Miles, please.
Okay, so they have transparent pricing. Interest rate advantages of interest rate swaps.
Page 4.
Page 4, they can be closed out early if we don't need it anymore, or we think that monetary conditions dictate us closing it out, then we can do that. They can be extended and they can have varying principal amounts. Transparent pricing, they're priced on they're priced by the banks on an interbank market. We know where those prices are, and if a bank was not taking a liberty with you, then we would immediately inform you, and we just say that we don't want to undertake that transaction and tell them why. They're actually very good, the banks now, because they actually, I mean, we're not boasting or anything about our abilities, but they know that if we're looking at the pricing that they're providing you, that we'll be looking at it. As I said, the yield curve, sometimes you can get very attractive interest rates, especially using forward start interest rate swaps, such as we currently have. That's probably disappeared in the last week or so. Actually, the yield curve has changed a bit, and some of those longer term rates have moved up. As I said, swaps can be used to hedge future debt, not just current debt. And swaps can mature after the maturity of the underlying debt. So you can have a debt maturity from the LGFA in, say, 3 years. We could hedge you. We can provide you with a fixed rate out as far out as 8 years. So it doesn't have to be tied specifically to the maturity of date of a funding instrument. They are subject now. Disadvantage of swaps. Last page, page 5. They're subject to market valuations, and when interest rates fall, the value of the swaps declines, but when interest rates rise, the value of the swap increases. How the valuation of the portfolio and the balance sheet is treated is determined by the borrower's position on hedge accounting. So if you hedge account swaps, it's a complicated accounting arrangement. It doesn't go through the P&L. But if you don't hedge account them, then the variance in this is on balance date, the variance in the value of the swaps has to go through the P&L. If you're in profit, if the swaps are in profit, obviously it's a benefit. if they're in a negative valuation position, then that has to go through the P&L. But it's only an accounting entry. It's not an actual cash loss.
Yeah, and that's the important bit. It's an accounting entry. And at the end of each financial year, as we do our annual report, there's a formula we have to carry out as part of that evaluation process.
And then for LGFA sorts debt, it's slightly cheaper to enter into a fixed rate bond than entering into a floating rate note and then overlaying a swap on it. But offsetting that, interest rate swaps can be used in situations where fixed rate bonds cannot be used. And that's, as I said, the main one is hedging future debt. Because if you have a fixed rate bond, it has to be here and now that it starts. But we could start an interest rate swap in 2 years' time to hedge future debt. And as the agreement needs to be in place, it's an International Swap Dealers Association agreement. You've got it. We thought we had to go through a long process, and then we found out that actually Westpac did have one for you from years and years ago. They didn't know about it until they went digging, and an onboarding process needs to be completed. I just have to check on the status of that. So that's the interest rate swap presentation. The last point I'll make is that we are working, once the policy is adopted and we can use interest rate swaps, then we will look to initiate a hedging program of looking at your future debt. We will have quarterly meetings with Leanne and the Treasury team in person or on Teams, and we'll be producing quarterly reports. But the other thing is that we are here every day to have, to clarify any points that you need doing. And Leanne and I have worked together for a few years now, and she knows we know each other, we know the process, we know how each other work. I'm looking forward to it, and I think it'll be a benefit to Rangitikei.
So you Chair, one quick question really for Leanne and Warren to a certain extent. With regards to reporting this, with regards to particularly our end-year reports and finance, but monthly reporting or quarterly reporting through finance, does it change anything in the reporting formats?
Not through the chair, not so much. There'll be an additional report to the Bancorp Treasury report that we will present to Council, probably through the Finance and Performance Committee, unless I'm instructed to bring it through Risk and Assurance, or either.
Yeah.
And it'll be direct report from Bancorp that will give you the overview. It will give you the confirmation we're within our covenants.
Yes.
It will give you a bit of a market commentary overview. And Miles has always consistently taken me through that ahead of that to be able to present and answer that for you.
That'll possibly have trend lines and
Correct.
going forward and backwards to give a trend line, will it?
On
Does it have that level of detail?
on the environment, it certainly does. I'm not sure if it does on our specific council, Miles.
Sorry, I missed that. Wasn't too clear. Sorry, what was that?
I was just asking the question about any future reporting from Bancorp, how that would get shown in our order paper documents, and Leanne's explained where that could be shown. But I was wondering what the trend lines might show. Does it show that level of detail, or?
So I'm not sure what trend lines you're referring to. Sorry.
So Miles, consistently you've shown us in your quarterly reports trend lines on the 90 different movements within the New Zealand international lines. Do you show the trends on our cost of interest over past and moving forward?
I don't have the past data, but we produce a projected cost of funds for you.
Yeah,
based on the amount of fixed rate debt that you've got, and where you haven't got fixed rate debt, what the market future floating rate is. So yes, we produce a projected cost of funds, which is only as good as the current market information, and it does change.
Yeah.
Thank you, that answers it.
Through the chair, what I have found in the past working with Miles and Bancorp is that he has consistently reduced our average cost of debt.
Thank you.
Another question from Councillor Maughan.
Just a quick one. If we're saving money on our interest, that's fine. We just need to see the net change too, because there'll be a fee that's charged by Bancorp. So, yeah, it's not just seeing the difference in the interest rate between one interest cost and another. It's with the fees included as well, is what I'd like to see,
Okay,
you know, because you can save money one way and spend it all on consultants and another sometimes.
Awesome. Okay, hey, anything else, queries from Miles? Thank you very much for your advice, Miles, and we look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
No, thank you. Sorry, this went a wee bit over time.
I really appreciate it.
thanks,
Thank you.
Miles, appreciate it, talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so, just moving along there, I'd like to move that the committee recommends to council to approve the treasury management policy with those typos, etc. And
Yes.
Just
yeah,
I've just got one question that I'm not
Sorry.
wanting a detailed report on now, but just want to raise it as a potential issue with regional CCOs being set up. There is a transference of debt, absolutely. But whether that, I have yet to see absolute clarification as to whether that debt is associated with the asset value of the debt or whether it's associated with the debt associated. And the difference is that, for instance, if you're transferring, say, taking a wastewater plant, that a lot of our debt, or quite a chunk of it, is associated with the process, internal consenting processes, etc., to get to that asset value. And I think that this will be a discussion that comes up in the future around exactly the value of the debt transference, whether it includes the consenting costs and everything associated to reach the asset. So I'm not going to want a detailed conversation here, but I'm just saying, raising it as I think that it will become a pertinent issue. And I'd like to understand it further.
yeah, thank
Quickly
you.
off the top of my head, I would have thought it was all capitalised, and that's what you're doing, but I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I'm just raising that. I mean, I take our current debt and at a slightly different figure, 46 million. And I understand that you're working at 30th of June, so that's the difference. I'm not sure that all of that would transfer. So,
Yeah, it's my understanding as well, with the conversations with DIA, it's directly attributed and allocated to those activities, and we can prove.
perhaps we have an offline conversation.
Happy to.
With regard to that, and just also to save a little bit of time in terms of as we get into individual reports by budget, and these reports are historical, and effectively what I'd like to see us in the future is take one of those reports, and whether it is wastewater or drinking water or community or whatever, it doesn't really concern me. But what I'm interested more and more is in terms of projection report. So this is historical that we get, but it doesn't flavour it to where we are headed. And that's, I think, probably the most crucial thing that we have to bear in mind. But that's, again, another potential offline conversation.
Yeah, one of the things we're definitely introducing, I believe, as of next month is in our capital program that you see on the final page. We will be starting to present what we believe will be carried forward earlier rather than telling you on the 30th of June, because we're seeing the things that won't happen. I guess the projection of going forward is what the LPP is. That's all our annual plans for 10 years. That is the future. Are you, we'll do it offline, but maybe you're asking for a forecast moving forward.
And with a focus on also on where efficiencies can be gained within the process as well.
So we're not going, that will be a real in-depth with managers, because we in finance aren't going to know those efficiencies. That's going to be.
But I'll have a conversation.
Yeah, I think we can move that conversation forward offline. Councillor Wong, with the query.
Could I just clarify with Leanne about the page 8? The table clearly states that it's the box that shows the the amount of our policy to for fixed interest rate covers from 0 to 2 to 4, 4 to 8 years. But does the policy actually cover how much of our funds, our debt can be covered by interest rate swaps? Because I don't see that being covered in that box.
No, because what it's saying is this is what the fixed rate must be.
Yes.
So the offset of what's not fixed is floating. So therefore that's your gap. So whatever's
So the
floating
floating is
where you
the-
use your swaps to project out,
Right.
so that we're not subject to this of the market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right.
No more questions? I've moved item 9.1. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yeah.
Councillor Wong, Peter second. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So now we'll move to item 9.2, the finance snapshot.
So I'm presenting this on Lorraine's behalf. She's out away for this week. So I'll take the report as read. There's already been reference to how we're sitting with our capital spend. So I suspect the best thing I can do is take questions and answer them as best as I can.
Any questions then?
No.
Councillor Loudon?
Just on the capital spend, expenditure, it seems to be tracking as though the gap's getting wider, as if we're lagging behind. And I'm just concerned about the timing of more borrowing in January, when the capital spend is getting less.
So through the chair, I can tie both those together. So the capital borrowing we borrowed in January was specifically because we knew we had to pay for a land settlement.
Yep.
So we borrowed for that. So that was one capital project. The capital spend to date shown on page 30 now reflects the revised budget, which includes all carry forwards, and we're sitting around 25%, which is still nowhere near good. But what it does reflect is that we know there's some projects there that will not be completed in this year. And that's where I will start adding, Warren and I'll start adding projection for what will not be completed this year. We only borrow when we need to borrow the money. We don't borrow in advance of that. Well, you know, we have the confidence that we're going to be spending the money. We start to look low on our cash flow, we borrow. And the beauty of working with Bancorp is we have such flexibility.
That borrowing was only short term, it's only 3 months.
We've done it for 3 months because the interest rates were dropping still, and we did not want to be locked in. And we needed to bring this treasury policy to council or to finance and performance so we can get council to approve it so that we can actually start using some more flexibility and capitalising on the lower falling interest rates as they keep falling.
So do you have a forecast of what borrowing we'll be making in 3 months' time? Or in?
Not yet, but we're projecting that we're going to be around the 70 million at 30 June. Our annual plan, I believe, says 73. At the moment, we're saying we're going to be around 70, but we will start revising our capital spend, particularly in Arno's area, because that's where the bulk of our spend is. And it's the big things that we haven't got control over: Martin Rail Hub, the Martin Water Strategy, those sorts of things, that there's just a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and we can't speed them up any quicker than we'd really like to do right at this moment.
Subsequent?
Yes, if it's quick, please.
Liquidity benchmark, at 6.5, it requires 10% or more to be in the bank. Loose calculations suggest that we actually got very close to that benchmark when we made January borrowings, 5 million, to take our debt up to 49, but also to put money in the bank. We just seem to be running very close to that liquidity benchmark.
No, because Not that I was conscious of, I'd have to go back and look at that, but not that I was conscious of, because our cash flow, we knew we had the rates income coming in, so we held off borrowing until, and we kept working with Graham, who was handling the settlement of that. We kept putting off borrowing that money until the very last minute. Originally, we thought we'd be borrowing it in December, but I didn't see any risk at that point in time. I'd have to go back and have a look at that.
It just seems to be the borrowing sort of happens around that time when we get close to that benchmark. So from back historically.
Correct, because we borrow when we need to. We don't borrow in advance. And this is where it's different to a mortgage. We borrow to manage our cash flow.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no way I want to borrow money and just have it sitting in the bank, because the interest rate from the bank is always going to be lower than what we have to pay the cost of debt.
However, this will take your borrowing to 49 million. You borrow to pay a bill, and that will take that down.
Yeah.
The bank will go back down to sort of, 2.5 million or thereabouts. You're starting to get close to being outside your liquidity.
I'll have a look at that, because that's not my understanding. So let me have a look at that and I'll come back
That'd be
to you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Simon, if, we just need to move this meeting on. If you've got some queries, I'm quite happy for you to contact Leanne directly and get the explanations you require. I hope it's okay, Leanne.
Absolutely. We'll have been analysis looking forward on our liquidity.
Councillor Moore.
Just on total loans by activity. The column that says total loans, is that a print area where it says 30th of June 2024 and total loans as that? Because we've got loans allocated as
Yours
that.
just dropped to the next column.
Yeah.
No, dropped to the next 9, sorry.
We had a bit of, I'll try to find the page that was on.
Because you've got loans allocated as at the 31st of the 1st, 2025.
Yep.
And then you got loans as at the 30th, the 6th, 2024. Then you've got total loans as at the 30th of 6th, 2024. Should that be 2025?
No, because we haven't finished 30 June 20. So what we were trying to show is our total loans versus what we've allocated, and often that's a movement of internal versus external. And so at January this year, we've brought in, we're sitting at 49 million, as you know. It was a bit, I struggled on this when we tried to get it right. So we had 25, we're now sitting, I see what you're trying to ask me. Yeah, I'm going to hand that to Warren because I got
Okay.
totally baffled.
I'll have a crack at it for you. So unfortunately, I think some headings have fallen off the top of the report. So the column to the immediate left is the external loans. So that's where we've actually borrowed from the LGFA and we've used this, the new floating rates that Leanne's just talked to. So that's the 49 million. So that's our true external loans. The next column across is our internal loans. So what that is that's where activities have over the years borrowed essentially from within council. We've used cash to fund capital works, historical capital works, and we haven't externally borrowed. We've used the cash we've actually had. So that's the internal loans of 25 million. The reason that that's shown as at the 30th of June is we only true up the internal loans balances once a year as part of the annual accounts process, when we actually look at what the net revenue or net expenditure of those activities is and look at the borrowing, look at the capital spend at the end of the year, and we true up the internal loan position, but we only do that once a year. And so that's why you've got an active external loan balance at 49 million that's moved from 44 million in our prior report. And you've got the internal loan sitting at 25. So that says our total loan balance as at today, per our accounts is 74 million. Does that kind of help explain it? Yep.
Yeah, so that'll 2025 figure will come in once you've.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Once we've done the true up of all the internals at the end of the year. Yeah.
And this needs to be, just to clarify that too, as part of this debt transfer, internal debt is treated exactly the same as external debt.
So just you'll make that amendment to those.
Just those headings, yeah,
yes,
yeah,
that'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd just like to congratulate you on that table. I think it's fantastic and a huge help. Councillor
Yeah,
Wilson.
just a quick observation, Chair, but throughout the document, as you read through it, there's references to $49 million in loans. And then that number also transfers to the debt comment. And I'm referring to page 17, but on that page, it says less cash equivalents, and it says net debt of 39.46. So I understand what it is, and I understand how that figure comes about, but it can be it's a little bit misleading in what the current position is, because we carry cash and we have cash coming in all the time. So the net debt figure is only mentioned there once, but the 49 loan figure as debt figures is mentioned multiple times over this and the next section of this report. So just saying it can be a little bit confusing or misleading as to what the actual position is.
Correct. So our external debt is 49 million.
Yes.
And at the moment we have X amount of dollars in the bank.
Yes.
That gives us our net debt. If we use that 25 million that we've just talked about, if we put all of that into debt, we'd have more cash in the bank, obviously, which would make our net debt would still end up being, it would actually look better, but it seems pointless to do that when we've got our own cash to reallocate.
You're just referencing the net debt position at 39 as opposed to the 49 is relevant to note, because we
Okay.
do, and we actively hold cash as a decision of council through our treasury management policy. We actively do that for very good reason,
Yeah.
but it's important to note that position, the net debt position, is 39, not 49.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, perhaps some of the confusion for that is that some of those sustainability ratios that we use actually require net debt, which is the deduction of cash, and that's probably where the confusion comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other queries to item 9.2? Okay, I'll move that the report financial snapshot January 2025 report be received. Seconder, please.
Every second.
Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9.3, page 31 is the treasury and debt. Hand it back over to Leanne.
Well, thank you through the chair, and I will take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions there?
I'm happy to move this be received. We've had a fair discussion with regard to this.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Carter. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Standard QV report. Page 35. Any queries? I'll move that report be received. Seconder, please. Councillor Wong. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9.5, which is the LGFA update, shareholder and borrower update. A very interesting report, I thought. Some comments as we take it through. On page 46, you can see the increased borrowing significantly at the end of last financial year across the sector. Page 47, I just want to point out that all our current lending is with local government, the LGFA. So because of the cheaper rate, they get to us. I thought on page 50, it was interesting how the significant increase in swaps since March 24, can see a lot of councils taking that swap opportunity. And then we come to page 55 and the impact of balanced budgets and the fact that this is the lowest outcome for the sector since financial prudence benchmarks were introduced in 2012. These are showing the significant problems facing our sector currently. So as per our long-term plan, we are unlikely to balance our budget until year 6 of our current long-term plan.
Just to comment around that and advice to council. I think I've made several comments around government's willingness to go down the rates pegging position. If they do that, the natural reaction to councils will be increase of an unbalanced budget. So if they pegged rates, rate increases, and you were required to stay within a rates peg or go into detailed explanation or consultation, what you'll find is that councils will favour unbalanced budgets as a way of dealing with it.
Well, not fund appreciation.
Sure. In terms of the sustainable finance series that's mentioned on page 58, was that something that councillors were invited to be part of, or is that for staff?
No, there's nothing to stop council laws being invited to attend that. It hasn't actually even been on my radar, unfortunately, with the amount of things that have been on my radar.
Right.
But if there's an interest from council to attend that, then we can, because from what I recall, it is all on Teams, we can set that up.
So if anyone's interested in that, then can they contact Leanne directly, please? So any further questions or any questions around that document? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Really interesting read, and it certainly highlights the pressure that councils across the board are under. But a little concern, I think, and you may not have the answer, Leanne, but maybe a little bit of focus, is if we're going to see these increasing CCOs, and there's a number listed in there as borrowing now, these CCOs are going to form in whatever entity that they're going to do. Significant levels of borrowing comes that with to get on top of the deficit we have in our infrastructure across 3 quarters. Is there a risk that you think we need to be aware of, or are we considering what that risk of this massive increased borrowing by LGFA, bearing in mind that we have a pro rata share to guarantee that over and above a certain amount of borrowing ourselves, which we will be in that camp? Should there be something that we should be focusing on or considering? And are those conversations being had at a much, much higher level? Because these ratios are going to go through the roof in the next 3 to 5 years, would be my thinking.
You're 100% correct, and that is a concern that Warren and I raised when we were meeting with DIA recently, is how does this, if we're guaranteeing it, we the council are guaranteeing it, but we have no control over the level they can borrow up to that 500%.
Yes.
We're not going to be able to say, no, you can't do that, but we the council are going to be at risk. That is a process we're still working through, but it is a real, for us lay people, from where Warren and I sit, it feels a real concern.
I guess further to that, if I may, is there, and I won't labour the point, but what sort of protections do you think we can actually be having at that next level? Because if we end up in a situation with rates pegging and capping and all these sorts of things, we could be left a little vulnerable, would be my thinking.
I guess.
And it requires a lot more discussion, I know, but I'm just signalling that's a concern that I have.
It would be an interesting point because under the LGFA borrowing rules, of course, the borrowing is essentially guaranteed by our ability to rate. But in the future, and to His Worship's point, if they then cap our ability to increase rates, that changes the whole protection that the LGFA has in place currently. So, yeah, certainly food for thought. But I understand under the CCO structures going forward, the amount that a council will be liable for is the uncalled portion of their shareholding, and we would be able to recoup that through rates, but it would all stop if there was a cap on rates. So yeah, I think that's further development.
Thank you for that point. Good comment.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, there's a clear understanding of the limitation of our exposure. We're not exposed to, for instance, the whole country. I think that's another subject to take us through, to be honest.
No, just in the essence of time, hold that thought, councillor.
Yeah.
One quick question.
Yes, quick,
Good time.
thank you.
Just on page 47, December quarter lending activity. 39 councils borrowed long term. What's long term as far as LG Energy? See this, if is concerned.
I believe it's greater than 12 months because commercial papers are anything under 12 months.
How does that sort of fit with our presentation from today? When councils are looking at long-term borrowing on a fixed rate, when someone like Bancorp could reduce their borrowings.
Bancorp has a really good working relationship with LGFA, and all of us as councils submit on a very regular basis to LGFA our projected debt for the year. We don't have to commit fixed or floating. However, you heard from Miles this morning that over 90% of the councils that use LGFA and that are his clients are on that mix of fixed and floating. So LGFA are exposed to that at all times. So I don't believe that we have a significant change in their portfolio.
I was just curious as to why councils are fixing for long term.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to move that the report LGFA general information be received. Seconded, please. Thank you, councillor Walton. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Welcome to the table, Jenna. Item 9.6, the statement of service provision 6 months report, July 2024 to December 2024, on page 62. Let you take it through it, please.
Thank you. So this just provides an update on where we are in terms of meeting our end of year targets. I'll take this report as read, but take the opportunity just to highlight a couple of areas where we're doing particularly well. So these include the processing of our building and subdivision consents. Our libraries have been doing very well with the number of diverse programs they're holding each month. And then also our water supply response times have also been achieved quite well over the last 6 months. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I just quickly, I'm not familiar with what's happened with the happy or not system and why it's been taken down.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So the happy or not system was recalled in November of last year due to their systems going down. So they sent replacements, the tablets. They sent replacements. When they did, we did the transition in November, December, we did another transition of 2 sites. At that time, we didn't pick up until we came back to work in January. They weren't actually capturing the happy or not. So behind the system in the IT, use a serial number that needs to be transferred from one tablet to another, and then that never got done from an external provider that provides that to us.
So we're going to continue with the system now.
Yes.
We've got it fixed.
We've got it fixed, so we'll
Right.
continue. So because we didn't have a meeting in January, we didn't pick it up
Yeah.
until January.
Thank you. Councillor Carter?
I see there is some happy or not comments in there.
Yes,
No.
that's
And the one that
from.
makes me laugh is the guy hurt my feelings.
Oh, yeah. The next report.
Sorry, there was something else here that I wanted to. Really. Okay, so no further questions.
Just a question. Say if we get complaints, whether it's in consenting or something, that come through as either as request for service or complaints, questions raised within the building, within our council process, how do we handle that in terms of this is the public interface buildings, etc. But how do we handle the number of questions? Take one example, for instance, say somebody says, oh, I've been waiting on a consent for 6 months, or those sorts of questions. How do we understand that?
So if I can answer that, so the statement of service performance is what we have as our performance levels in the long-term plan. So they're very prescriptive, and that's what this report is. The next report is where you're talking about. So those complaints and those things that come through either through the RFS system or in formally as a complaint or through our QR system captured in that report that you see next. So we cover them off that way. This is the different report. This is the one that's directly related to service performance.
Sorry, and just quickly, with regards to the playgrounds compliance and those monthly inspections, yes, we don't meet that. Do we not have monthly inspections of our playgrounds?
So I know maybe
Sorry.
a better place to comment on this, but what that comment in there is saying, at the December monthly check, what happened is we found that we're only meeting 50% of our compliance, and since then we have scheduled a lot of maintenance, hoping that future inspections we will be have higher compliance there.
Yeah, I can, through you, Madam Chair, we have people that are qualified to do these audits. Some of the staff that's left us had the qualifications. We've trained new staff in their place, and these will go up again. And I'm hoping that we would actually achieve it by the end of the year if we can increase those audits going from here till June.
Right. Okay. Certainly, I would have an expectation that our playgrounds meet public safety requirements. Okay. Therefore, I'm happy to move that the report statement of service provision 6 months report, July 24 to December 24, is received. Seconder, please. Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Final item of the day is not page 79, 9.7, the public feedback performance report. Who's going to talk to this, please?
Claire and Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Morena Koto, take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Just one, and I know we are pressed for time, but I think it's the report's good, and I think that it's really encouraging to see the level of engagement we are starting to get. So, seeing as this is a public meeting, I think we need to thank those that are taking the time to engage with us and to share their thoughts, because it helps us to do a better job as a council as a whole. So I think we need to be reaching out as often as possible and making sure that when someone takes the time to get engaged with us, that we send back the appropriate feedback. So thanks for your work in that space, and let's hope that more and more will come of it.
Great, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Moore.
In your January media releases about the removal of invasive weed from the reservoir, surprisingly high. Can you just elaborate on that
Yeah,
a little bit, please?
through you, absolutely. It was surprisingly high because of the fact that you think about some of the other posts that we do and the other things that we share. And that was just Ben popping along to the team that were releasing the beetles and snapping a couple of pictures and chucking up a bit of initiative about a community issue that was happening. And so in the traditional grand scheme of social media, you wouldn't necessarily expect that to get as much traction. It did. It got an incredible amount of traction. Horizon shared it. It was shared from some more of our council neighbour partners as well, which was really promising to see. And Ben and I had a bit of a conversation after the fact as well. And I think it's also a byproduct of the other hard work that Ben does behind the scenes. He talks about it's like you have tags that kind of tag you along and kind of have posts that get you along. And then you have like a big post, like for example, the work that he did around the Martin Country Music Festival. That's a little bit higher work, but if you have those big posts, then these little ones like these community ones get far more engagement because people in general, and to Councillor Wilson's point, the public in general are engaging with the work that we're doing. So it's surprisingly high because in my professional experience, I wouldn't expect a post like that to be so engaging, but it's really positive because it shows that people are engaging in all of our posts, regardless of whether they're video or whatever. The algorithm kind of almost doesn't matter because our community is really engaged. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I really enjoy your report. I enjoy seeing what the different social media, brings out, and it sort of that depicts the following, I guess. And it's just so nice to see colour in our order report as well. So thank you very much to you and your team for your work. And can I please have a mover and a seconder for that report? Councillor Carter moving, seconded by Councillor Charland. All those in favour? Against? Carried. That's call the meeting closed.